Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 9 o'clock. I'd like to try to start on time so that everybody that's made an effort to show up at this public hearing will be able to get to the issues of concern. The Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were given to the media first on Monday, July 3rd, 2017, and the second notice on Wednesday, July 5th, for the record. Today is Monday, July 10th, and the time is now 9 o'clock. The committee will hear and accept testimonies, both oral and written, on the following: the referral of appointment of Cesar Garcia, physician for a member in the Insurance Business Officer Representative, Guam Banking Insurance Board, term length is 6 years. We'll be hearing on Bill 63-34, introduced by Senator Michael F.Q. Senectus, an act to require the Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation to determine the Guam source income generated from federally contracted activity by contractors who do not file their taxes on Guam, reconcile such information with the Section 30 reimbursement attributable to such income, and report its finding for further action to Imagalain Guam and the Speaker of the Legislature in Guam. Also, Bill number 64-34, as introduced by also Senator Mike Senectus, an act to require the Department of Revenue and Taxation to, in collaboration with Guam International Airport, determine the air transportation taxes paid by inhabitants of Guam since the establishment of such tax, reconcile such information with the Section 30 reimbursement and attributable to air transportation taxes, and report its finding for further action to Imagalain Guam and the Speaker of Legislature in Guam. Bill number 65-34, as introduced also by Senator Mike Senectus, an act to require the Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation to, in collaboration with the Banking and Insurance Commissioner, determine the Guam source income generated by business engaged in mortgage financing activities and banking, insurance, trust, and investment entities who do not file their taxes on Guam. Reconcile such information with the Section 30 reimbursement attributable to such income, and report its finding for further action to Imagalain Guam and the Speaker of Imagalain Guam and the Speaker of Legislature in Guam. Bill number 88-34, as introduced by Senator James Spaudon, an act to amend F of Section 50103 of Chapter 50, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to fees resulting from the insurance of bonds and other obligations. Bill number 122-34, as introduced by Senator Thomas Morrison and Speaker B.J. Cruz, an act to amend 26403 of Article 4, Chapter 26, Division 2, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, relative to incremental increase of liquid fuel tax rates for the purpose of funding village road repair and construction projects. Bill number 123-34, COR, as introduced by Senator Will Castro, Senator Tom Morrison, myself, and Senator Dennis Rodriguez, an act to extend non-commercial driver license reciprocity to residents of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands who are United States citizens, issued by his or her home island, by adding a new section to Title 16 Guam Code Annotated, Section 3101 license requirement. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues, Speaker B.J. Cruz, Senator Will Castro, and Senator Tommy Morrison. General rules for public hearing. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order of signing up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony may be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the nominee's appointment or the bill. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony, as may be desired by members of the panel. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name for the record. We will now begin testimony for confirmation of Mr. Cesar L. Garcia to be a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. Mr. Garcia, would you please? And if I'm correct, Mr. Logan, you plan on testifying for Mr. Garcia? Please have a seat in the panel. Mr. Garcia, I'll ask you to please introduce yourself and then go ahead and
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Cesar Garcia. I'm 73 years old, originally from the Philippines, married for 52 years to Enriqueta Acacio, also from the Philippines. We both became American citizens in 2008, and that's the fulfillment of my wife's lifelong dream. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, major in accounting, from the University of the East, Manila. I took and passed the examination for certified public accountants in 1964. I'd been in the insurance business for 51 years, starting in 1968, when I joined Insular Life FGU Insurance Group's training department. From there, I worked for various other insurance organizations in the Philippines, such as the American Foreign Insurance Association, or AFIA, from 1970 to 1975, the American International Underwriters, Inc., which is part of the AIG group, from 1975 to 1992, and City State Insurance Company, a Filipino-Singaporean joint venture, from 1992 to 1999. While I was with AIG, my duties included coordinating underwriting operations and reporting for Guam and Micronesia. And during that period, I had the good fortune of being able to visit Guam and the outer islands a number of times. I joined Moylan's in October 1999 as risk manager and chief accountant to help organize its newly established property and casualty company called FirstNet Insurance Company. Today, I hold the position of Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of the company. I had earlier served as a member of the Banking and Insurance Board for a 6-year term, which ended in February 2017. And I'll be happy to serve a second term if the honorable members of the Legislature decide to confirm my nomination. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Logan, I know you're here to support his nomination, so I'll have you speak next.
Thank you, Senators. My name is R. De Logan. I'm the Banking and Insurance Commissioner. I've been serving as the Banking and Insurance Commissioner since the year 2011. I've worked with Cesar with the Insurance and Banking Board for the last, since I became Banking and Insurance Commissioner. Actually, he was asked by John Camacho, who was the Banking Insurance Commissioner when I was the Director. I've known, as the Commissioner of Banking and Insurance, Mr. Cesar to be very, very prompt with his meetings. He's always in the meetings, and his level-headedness and his experience brings a lot to the Commission. Right now, we're working, we're working with the insurance industry to revamp the whole insurance laws. We are trying to be in compliance with the National Association of Insurance Commission, and Mr. Garcia's knowledge and expertise, if we can keep him again for another 6 years, would be an asset to the people of Guam and to the Banking Insurance Commission. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Colleagues, Speaker?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Garcia for his service to the Commission the last 6 years. And with that kind of testimony and your experience, I'm sure that we'll be confirming you in the next session.
Senator Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for accepting to continue to serve on the board, both your education and prior experiences are appropriate for this kind of work. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to verbalize my support for the Brother Knight.
I was kind of expecting that there, Senator Castro. Senator Morrison.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate you, Mr. Garcia. And I just want to point out some things real quick. I know there has been a lot of emerging technologies that have been taking place where some of the, at least with respect to the banking industry, believe that they are considered disruptive technologies out there that are forcing the bank to make adjustments where people are looking at ways to save in many ways of how they transact value, either to business or to peer-to-peer. And I just wanted to point it out if you're aware of those emerging technologies and how we're seeing the banking industries are starting to adopt these emerging technologies that are now allowing for individuals to not involve third-party intermediaries or just deal directly with each other.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me, I forgot to call up Dr. Ron McNich. I have you as oral testimony, sir. Before I make any comments, Dr. McNich.
Thank you, Senator St. Augustine and honorable senators and Mr. Speaker. My name is Ron McNinch. I'm testifying for myself. I just wanted to offer my very positive support for Mr. Garcia. I observe a lot of boards on island. I go to a lot of meetings, and I take a look at how boards operate. The banking and insurance fields require a fiduciary trust and fiduciary responsibility. At the banking and insurance meetings, I notice Mr. Garcia will always declare if he has a conflict or potential conflict in these meetings, and I think that's a very admirable practice that many of our board members across Guam should always take a look at. And I just wanted to give my very positive and good support. He's a very fine gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. We also have Nancy Tan here in support of Mr. Garcia. Hi, just support. Well, you know, Mr. Garcia, I'm surprised. Were you the chairman of the board? You weren't the chairman? No, on the, it's for renomination, but on the past six years, I was just curious because just looking at your testimony and your background, I'm surprised. I'm not too sure who else is board, but with your background, I'm surprised you're not the chairman. But I do thank you for accepting the appointment. And like the Speaker Cruz said, we look forward to your confirmation at the end of the month and your participation back on the board, and maybe they'll consider you for chairman. Then we'll know who we're talking to. Really have fun. Thank you, sir.
I think he's got a question that he asked. You wanted a question?
No, I didn't want to delay this any further, Mr. Chairman. I support Mr. Garcia. I just wanted to point that out. There has been very aggressive movement with some emerging technologies out there that impact the banking industry and many other sectors out there, and I've seen them evolve and seeing how from the public sector, the private sector, governments worldwide are converging on how to make transacting value either peer-to-peer or from banking to banking or banks to banks much more efficient. And I'm sure maybe you are aware, and I'm just putting that out there for on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And that completes the confirmation hearing for Mrs. Garcia. We will now move to bill number 63. And if we just wait for less than a minute, we'll get the sign-in sheet, whatever sign-in sheet exists. Whoever signed in for bill 63, 63, 64, and 65. I don't think anybody has signed in. But I'm going to read a letter that I received from Senator Seneca, submitted to the committee, so that it'll be for the record, and it relates to all three bills. Dear Senator Agustin, I want to thank Chairman Agustin for the opportunity to speak on these measures, Bill 63, 64, and 65, to seek to obtain complete reimbursement from the federal government of Section 30 funds due to the people of Guam. In this effort, we seek to work together with the administration to seek funds from sources which may have not been reconciled in the past. The Organic Act says, any tax generated by the people of Guam or economic activity in Guam and collected by the federal government must be remitted back to Guam, what we often call Section 30 funds. This includes taxes paid by military personnel stationed on Guam and federal government employees. However, there are other taxes being paid to the IRS which may be due to Guam as per the Organic Act. Bill 64-34 would seek the reconciliation of taxes paid by the mainland contractors who perform work on Guam and who may not be paying taxes to revenue and tax. These are taxes generated by business activity in Guam and are rightfully due to the people of Guam. Bill 64-34 would seek the reconciliation of federal air transportation taxes paid on airline tickets by Guam residents. These are federal taxes paid by Guam residents and again, under the Organic Act, should rightfully be given back to Guam. And finally, Bill 65-34 would seek the reconciliation of taxes paid by banking, insurance, investment, and trust companies who may be off-island but do business in Guam. These companies who manage 401ks and other retirement benefits are having contributions deducted pre-tax, thereby lessening their contributors' tax liability to Guam. In theory, this pre-tax benefit is supposed to be recaptured upon disbursement at retirement. However, these retirement contributions are sometimes being paid to the IRS instead of revenue and tax because of interpretation of the Internal Revenue Code. Those taxes should rightly come back to Guam under Section 30 of the Organic Act. As the federal government begins to register war survivors for reparation, we need to look harder for additional Section 30 revenues. If an alternative funding source for reparation is found, like Congresswoman Verdalio promised, then any new reconciled funds can pay for tax refunds or the many pending capital improvements on this island. This is the due diligence we need to do to ensure there is money available for the people of Guam. Thank you for considering this bill, and I look forward to bipartisan support. Respectfully, Senator Michael F.Q. Nicholas. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, I'd like to advise you that nobody has come forth to testify for Bill 63, 64, or 65, other than the written testimony from Senator Nicholas. But I did receive a call this morning from the Director and Deputy Director of Revenue and Tax that they will be submitting written testimony in reference to these three bills. And as soon as I will make sure that everybody gets a copy. That being said, we will now move to, moving along, we'll now move to Bill. Any of my colleagues want to make any statements reference to the bills? None? We will now move to Bill 88-34, which also has nobody testifying, and that was introduced by Senator James Spaldon, an item of F of 501-103 of Chapter 50, Title 12, Guam Code annotated, relative to fees resulting from the issuance of bonds and other obligations. Being that even the sponsor is not here, we will move on to the next bill. And that bill will be considered done. We will now move to Bill number 122-34, introduced by Senator Thomas Morrison and co-sponsored by Speaker B.J. Cruz. An act to amend Section 26403 of Article 4, Chapter 26, Division 2, Title 11, Guam Code annotated, relative to incrementally increasing the liquid fuel tax rates for the purpose of funding village road repair and construction projects. I would ask, I have signed up Glenn Youngro, sir, the Director of DPW. And you have written oral testimony. I have Ken Leon Guerrero, oral testimony. I have Darrell Tagri. Is he here? Oh, you'll be reading it?
So he asked me to read it for him.
Okay. We'll begin in the order that the sign-in, and we have Mr. Leonguero first. Correction, Mr. Ben. Right. But before we begin the testimony, they're both young girls. Before we begin the testimonies from the supporters, I would ask first Senator Tommy Morrison for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for acknowledging that we'll begin this before there's testimony in support. Mr. Chairman, thank you for scheduling this public hearing on Bill 122 and for the opportunity to discuss the bill's intent. Bill 122 proposes to adjust the liquid fuel tax rate by 4 cents per gallon over the next 3 years, a penny and a half on the first year, another penny and a half on the second year, and a final penny adjustment in the third year. I thank Speaker Cruz for agreeing to co-sponsor Bill 122 and for the research his team provided in support of the bill. Last established in 1983, Guam's liquid fuel tax and associated surcharge currently comprise half of all revenue in the Guam Highway Fund. Based on average collections for diesel, aviation, and gasoline tax and revenue between fiscal years 2010 and 2016, every penny increase in the liquid fuel tax should increase Guam's highway revenues by nearly $1 million. With the slight adjustment proposed in Bill 122, consumers can expect to pay an additional 50 cents or $6 a year. Bill 122 seeks to provide much-needed revenue to DPW so that the long list of village street repairs contained in the Guam Village Streets Master Plan, with an overall price tag of nearly $1 billion, can be addressed more quickly. Because Guam Highway Fund supports various DPW obligations and the needs for other agencies, including UOG, GCC, the Mayor's Council, Guam, and Revenue Tax, additional resources are necessary if we are to seriously work to fixing our village roadways. The slight adjustment in the liquid fuel tax rates also recognizes the demands placed on our roadways. They have significantly increased since 1983, with more personal and commercial vehicle activity, as our roadways affect nearly every aspect of lives, including movements of food, medicine, fuel, construction materials, furniture, and so much more. In closing, I want to make it known at this public hearing that I am prepared to amend Bill 122 so that the measure can move forward, notwithstanding the voter approval requirements set forth in Section 16311 of Title III GCA. If people want roads to be more safe, we have an opportunity to fix roads sooner and to begin repairs well before the next general election. I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I look forward to discussions from our public, and I welcome testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for the announcement of your pending amendment to your bill. I look forward to that, so that will be submitted as part of the committee's report for the floor. Now, I'd ask the co-sponsor if he would like to make any statements before we begin. Sir, Speaker?
I just joined the sponsor's statement. I thank him for coming to seek my assistance in co-sponsorship in this legislation. Earlier this year, we had introduced a bond bill, but we didn't have a funding source yet, and this could serve as the funding source for that bond bill. So we'll see how that works out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker. Hopefully this will be the funding source. Director Glenn Leonguero, before we get to Ken Leonguero. Sir.
Thank you, Senators, Senator Agustin, Speaker Cruz, Senator Morrison, and Senator Castro. I apologize, I don't have written testimony, but I will have written testimony submitted to you. I've been incapacitated, if you will, of sorts last week and the week before that. But I do intend to give you written testimony that supports this bill. I'm here to orally support this bill. As I've been here before this board, this body, to emphasize that we at the Department of Public Works have a keen interest to strengthening and building our roads for safety, for economic and even for social reasons. We've proven that we can build roads cheaply if we do it in-house, but we are fully acknowledge the reality that we are so far behind that we probably should be looking at other sources to emphasize or magnify our ability to fix our roads. Just as a place marker, and I've said this several times, when we do it with in-house capability where the Department of Public Works staff do the subsurface work and then we pave it, it costs us roughly about $500,000 a mile. Versus if we have to do it meeting federal highway standards, it costs us anywhere between $6 to $10 million a mile for a 2 to 3 lane highway. So significant difference, significant cost difference, and at this point in time, not looking to if you require me to do this, I'm happy to do that to put sidewalks and bike paths and stuff like that. That's the requirements that are required by law. However, if I just do road repairs, which is kind of where we're at now because we're really behind the 8 ball, we're saying that we need to get these road repair projects ongoing and no sooner than better than later. So I want to again thank you. I want to thank you for your support. I have whatever documents you need and be happy to share that with you if you should desire.
Thank you, sir. We'll now move to the other mission. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to add it a little bit, but I'll also say that we typically get $15.5 million a year from the federal highway fund, and that, as I've mentioned in the past, $5 million of that goes to the PMT. The remaining $10 million goes to the road projects that we have. And we have currently road projects that I promised Vice Speaker Terlahi, which I have the letter for her, the projects that we're going to pursue next year. In addition to that, we also have the Territorial Highway Fund, which we're looking to propose. And from the very first budget hearing that I had in this at the legislature, I was proposing that because we have this capability, that we would be very keen in wanting to improve our roadway system, and this is done two and a half years ago. So again, thank you very much.
Sir, we'll be coming back for questions for you. We're just going to get to the next testimony. Don't worry. I think some of us have a good number of questions for you. Sir, Mr. Ken Leon now.
I'm Ken Leon Guerrero with the Guam Citizens for Public Accountability. And I'm here to testify in favor of Bill 122's intent, but I'm here to testify against its particulars. The bill as written does not do enough for the people of Guam to merit the sacrifice that it is of their hard-earned dollars. The major concern I have about this bill, it's very vague about what the increased taxes are going to go for. Everybody I've talked to about raising fuel taxes is in favor of raising fuel taxes if we could be assured that those raises would be used to actually fix roads. So the fact that the bill is trying to raise taxes, it's a good idea. The stated goal to repair roads is a good idea, but that's only the stated goal in the media. What we're looking at is based on past abuses of special funds. And I say, for example, just from the highway fund, the fact that we're funding the buildings at University of Guam, which only benefit 3,000 or 4,000 people. You know, so if we're going to raise taxes on fuel, then those taxes need to be dedicated to something that everybody who contributes the taxes to can use, and that's village roads. Now, the director here said he can do half a mile of paving for $500,000 inside the village roads, and that's a good place to start. But this bill is weak. And when I say weak, we're talking about a penny increase. That penny increase doesn't even cover the cost of the study. The study was $1,150,000. So the first year of this bill won't even cover the cost of the study that was done to generate the highway master plan. So we need to be more aggressive. If we're going to raise gasoline taxes, let's raise them to a minimum, a level that matters. Right now, here on Guam, just between March and the end of June, the price of gas has fluctuated 45 cents, and the world didn't end. No one was tearing their hair out. In fact, I believe we just had another 10-cent increase just around 4th of July. And, you know, there wasn't people committing suicide, and there weren't mass protests at Adelup. So the people are willing to bear a reasonable tax increase, provided we have reasonably ensured that that tax is going to go for the purpose stated. Now, one of the media, when I say media goals of this increase, was to provide funds to pay for a $50 million bond down the road. I submit, if what the senators are saying, that every penny increase increases revenue by $1 million, if we do a 10-cent increase and raise $10 million that goes to public works specifically for repairing roads in the villages, then we won't need the bond, and we won't have to pay $30 million to off-island investors. It would be better for us to raise the taxes, use the tax money to make the repairs, and not send the interest off, but instead use that $30 million we would have paid in interest and fees and use that to repair roads. And also in the media, and just recently, Senator Morrison has talked about that he wants to waive the public approval. And I think that is going to be a major mistake. And it's that type of thinking that has shattered the trust between the people and our elected officials. You are asking to raise taxes. Let the people approve it. And then we'll feel better about it instead of having something, you know, just forced onto us. Now, the goal of the master plan was to improve transportation system. And I'm in favor of that because when I'm a senior citizen living on a fixed income, I don't know where you got the statistic that the average person uses 33 gallons of gas a month, but I very rarely go to town unless I have to, and I still use 16 gallons a week. So a 10-cent increase in gas is going to cost me personally, a senior citizen on a fixed income, $1.60 a week. $6.40 a month, $76.80 a year. Now there is a particular pothole in Agate that just cost me $800. Now to me, paying $76.40 a year to avoid having that repair would have been worth it. Every 2 years, I have to buy a new set of tires. Every 2 years, because I have a truck, I have to buy truck tires. I have to pay $800. In June, I just paid $800 for a new set of tires. And I'm not the only one. Everybody in this room, and even you guys up there, probably are buying new tires every couple of years. And the reason we buy them so frequently is because the potholes really wear out tires fast. And the majority of the potholes that we encounter are all in the villages. Not all of them, but just the majority, and especially the worst ones. So as you contemplate making repairs in the villages, I encourage you to remember Route 5, Route 5. So going back to what I said, I've been talking to a lot of people, not just about this bill, but about raising taxes in general. But we always talk about the fuel tax. And the fuel tax is low. It is way too low. Now, I've been on Guam for 10 years, and when I left, the fuel tax in California, I think, was 22 cents. We're paying how much? 4 now? How much are we paying? 4 cents a gallon? 5 cents a gallon?
10 cents, sir.
All right, so 10 years ago in California, it was 22. I don't know what it is now. So we have a lot of room to grow, especially if that money is going to something that people can see, something that people can feel. And that's the roads inside our villages. Now, several times in my testimony so far, I've talked about improving the transportation system. Instead of just using the money to fix the roads, there's one other thing that we could use this money for, and that would be to improve the mass transit system. Because if we use part of this money to improve the mass transit system, we take a tremendous number of vehicles off the road, which will slow down the rate of deterioration and allow public works to catch up. But more importantly, if we were to use a part of this tax increase to improve mass transit system, it would be an economic boost to the island. Could I get my slideshow, please? Now, as I start the presentation, I want to reinforce the point that right now the trust level in our elected officials is low for various reasons, and going around proposing to raise taxes and bypassing public approval is not a good idea. Next slide, please. Now, what we're looking at is a study that was done for the Guam Regional Mass Transportation when I was on the Governor's Committee to improve mass transit. And what we determined based on local information, utilizing formulas put together by the National Transportation Association, for Guam, the cost of a vehicle used daily to go to work is $19.23 a day. That's when you take the price of an average mid-sized car purchased used, 2 years or around 2 years old. The depreciation rate is $19.23 a day. Next slide. Now, this was back in 2014 when gas was actually higher than it is right now, and the cost was $9.54 a day for fuel. Next slide. Now, insurance and repairs for the average vehicle, we're talking late model, something that's less than 10 years old, runs $11.54 a day. We're talking 20 days, the work month. Next slide, please. So when we look at the depreciated cost of a car, next slide, we add to that the insurance and the repairs, next slide, and the cost of the fuel, next slide, we have a total operational cost of $40.31 a day for the average person. That's what it costs to own a car that you drive to work every day. Now, based on surveys that we did, we had people sitting at different locations and we counted traffic at rush hour times. And on Guam, about 75% of the cars are single passenger only. Next slide, please. So when we look at the cost at a personal level, next slide, you take the commuting cost of $40.31 a day, next slide, and subtract a daily bus pass. That comes to an increase in disposable income for a family of $37.31. Money used to purchase gas and insurance leaves the island forever. We don't get the economic spin or the multiplier effect that we would if we gave every working family on Guam that used a bus $37.31 a day. I use myself as an example. Since I retired, my purchasing activity, my entertainment activity, and my local shopping has dropped dramatically because of the cost of transportation and my lower income. But if I could use the bus every single time I had to come to town, it would be, in effect, give me a $37 a day increase that I would spend locally. So instead of spending the money on gas, I'd go to restaurants. I'd be, going to the movies. I'd be buying things here that I don't do now because I have to spend so much money on my transportation costs. And I know this to be true because when I lived in Honolulu for 12 years, I rode the bus 75% of the time. And when I rode that bus 75% of the time, I put less than 3,000 miles a year on my car. Here, retired, I'm putting 1,000 miles a month on my truck here on Guam, and I'm not alone. If we could capture all that money spent on auto and turn it into the economy, we would get a, next slide please. If we could just, now bear in mind there's only 125,000 cars registered on Guam. If we could get just 12,000 commuters from all classes, retirees, employees, students, to use mass transit system, this would be the daily influx into the local economy. Next slide. Taking that $37 times 12,000, it frees up $447,720 from auto expenses that go off island to cash that would be used on island. Next slide. So that works out to about $9 million a month. Next slide. Or $107 million a year. And there's an additional benefit to this as well. Next slide. There's $17 million on business privilege taxes that we would collect on this money that we divert away from the fuel stream into the economy that we're not collecting now. This is why the city of Honolulu, city and county of Honolulu, subsidizes their mass transit system to the tune of $10 million a year. They subsidize mass transit for $10 million a year. And what do they get in return? Scale of economy like this, because in Honolulu they have between 330 and 350,000 people ride the bus a day. So that's 330 to 350 times that $37.31 that is not leaving the island in the form of gas. So when we look at the goal of this bill, which is to improve the transportation system, a goal we spent $1.1 million to develop, let's fund it properly, because a part of that transportation master plan is the development of mass transit, and you see why. We don't have a mass transit system here. We have compliance with the ADA requirements of the federal highway guidelines. That's all we have. Because if you were to depend on mass transit for your job, you wouldn't have a job. And here's why. Next slide. Oh, pardon me. That's the Honolulu subsidy. And I'm wrong. It's $10 million. I looked it up. Next slide. This is the mass transit schedule. If you had a job, there's only 4 stops a day in Tumon. In the morning, 3 stops in the afternoon. And on other routes, there's only 3 stops in the morning and 3 stops in the afternoon. If I wanted to testify here today, I have to catch the bus in Agate at 7 o'clock. And then the next bus going back to Agate is 1 o'clock. And there have been times when I missed the bus, the 5:30 bus going to Agate, and there are no buses. So you see, we have a mass transit system that isn't geared to support commuters. If we were to take a portion or half of this money from this proposed increase of 10 cents that I'm talking about and divert that 5 cents over to mass transit, that would be more funding than mass transit has ever had. And if mass transit was running the way it should be run, then it would be a revenue generator for the government of Guam. Now, I want to make a point. Actually, there's 3 things we need to do, 4 things. First, we need to raise the fuel taxes, because as part of improving the mass transit system, you actually have to improve the roads in Guam, especially at the village level, if we're going to get our rolling stock to survive. Second, you need to appoint, and this is where the legislature comes in. Let's make sure the people we appoint to the boards are qualified. I've attended a large number of mass transit board meetings, and that board is paralyzed. They cannot make a decision on anything until they check with the front office. You could ask them to go, should we use white paper or cream paper? We'll have to check with the front office. So that's the first thing that's wrong with mass transit. We don't have a quality board, and we don't have experienced management. The second thing is we need to shift the focus from a disability compliance-based system to a commuter transit system. If we had a commuter transit system, you would probably take 25 to 30% of the cars on the road daily off the road. And that would make Glenn's job a lot easier, reducing the wear and tear on the roads. And the third thing that we need to do is we need to look at how we can use this fuel tax increase to actually pay for the repairs and pay for improvements in mass transit system, and not use it as an opportunity to go out and borrow how many $100 million this $10 million a year will provide. Because if we were to take our mass transit system and take it from being a disability support system to a commuter system, an additional benefit, you would be pushing the economic benefits of the tourism industry beyond Tumon and beyond Micronesian Mall. Because the cultures that we pursue, from the Philippines, from Japan, from China, from South Korea, they're all mass transit system oriented. If we had a decent mass transit system, you would see tourism extend to all areas of the island, just like we see in Honolulu. In Honolulu, anytime you're on a bus outside of the tourist corridor, 50% of the people on the bus are tourists. They're using the buses to go up to North Shore and Haleiwa, Waianae, places like that. So if we had that system here, we would see tourism expand beyond the limited borders of Micronesian Mall, GPO, and Tumon. And that would benefit all of the island. We would see an economic boost from the shift from fuel expenses to local expenses. We would see an economic boost from the tourism expanding beyond, and we'd see more businesses develop outside of the Tumon, Agana, Tamuning area, and that would all go to benefit our population. And then along with those things, you'd see corresponding increases in the business privilege tax. Can mass transit survive on Guam? It already does. Next slide. This is the slide for just one of the 4 bus companies. There are now 4 Japanese bus companies on the island. Whereas the Guam mass transit I showed you has 7 stops a day in Tumon, this is 102 stops a day in Tumon. Think about that. One bus company is doing 102 stops a day in Tumon, and it's making money. Now, I say it's making money because you wouldn't have 3 other competitors in that same market if they weren't making money. So that goes to reinforce the point I made earlier that our visitors are mass transit oriented. And if we were, I mean, now you see them coming here into Agana. There's a bus stop right across the street here now in front of the cathedral for the tourists coming out from Tumon. So it shows that if we had a mass transit system, not only would it benefit the people of Guam, it would benefit the tourists of Guam, and that benefiting both of those markets would benefit the government of Guam and help raise revenues they could be used in other areas. So if you're going to pass this bill, amend it and make it a bill worth passing. That is my testimony on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Do you have one from Darrell?
Yes, I do.
You just made his 5 minutes go down to 2. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, this is from Darrell Borja-Taggarty to the Honorable Chairman, Joseph Agustin, and the committee. Testimony in favor of Bill 12234. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to comment on Bill 12234. I am in favor of the stated intent of this bill. However, it would not accomplish its stated purpose as introduced. I recommend that the bill be substituted by the authors or the committee with the consent of the authors as amendments to and to add a new section to Article 5 of this chapter, which articulates and accomplishes legislative intent to establish liquid fuel surcharges for specific public purposes. Article 5 of Title 11, Chapter 26 should be retitled to reflect the several surcharges established. The educational destination of the original automotive surcharge should be strengthened in the text. I have prepared a draft for your consideration, which is enclosed. I have not calculated the revenue estimates for this proposal, but it appears that a 4 or 5 cents phased in over 3 years is overly timid compared to the occasional 10 to 25% swings in gas prices the public and commercial accounts have become accustomed to over the years. 5 cents is minor. Repairs and prioritized construction of village roads should be a fully supported DPW activity through a surcharge at the eventual target level starting October 1 of this year. Only this bill's authors gain if the pressing need is not fully funded for 30 months. Smooth repairs, grading for drainage, hard shoulders, lane markings, pedestrian and cycling route accommodations are all possible with adequate funding, and rights of way are the only way to get from one private property to another. We, the public, gas up regularly to travel local roads in our cars and trucks of all descriptions. The government should aggressively and systematically maintain these very same roadways in a manner that we expect and can afford. In addition, I would like to comment on legislative establishment of special funds. Special funds reflect the weakness of the Guam legislature budget process and of laws which compel the executive branch to follow the budget as enacted. The special funds of Article 5 reflect the legislature's inability to calculate the capital construction, replacement, and maintenance cost of schools, mass transit, and village roads, and include them in the annual budget. Lack of regular maintenance directly causes public facilities to deteriorate before their initially projected lifespans. It degrades the public's enjoyment of these facilities, and we deserve better. In the early 1970s, Fairfax County, Virginia, published an objective method for calculating the associated cost of public facilities. It is available for use by all other public entities. As Guam is roughly the size of Fairfax County, and because their scope of public services is similar to that of government of Guam, their method is directly applicable to Guam. This legislature should use its oversight powers and professional staff capabilities to calculate for itself the projected cost of all capital facility maintenance and replacement, and challenge the executive challenge executive direction to implement capital management, and include such details in the annual budget. We of the public know firsthand about lack of public facility maintenance and planning. It's been swept under the rug by lame excuses, most notably lack of funding. Appealing to adopt a park, adopt a road, adopt a school, happy labor concept, and community improvement zones. Shifting duties to the village mayor and their budgets and the like. It's overdue for each committee chairman in the legislature to address this system-wide shortcoming in detail at your level of responsibility, and for you to address it effectively within this, your elected term. Thank you for considering my perspectives on establishing a liquid fuel surcharge to benefit village roads. Sincerely, Darrell A. Borja Taggarty.
Thank you, sir. And will you be submitting? You'll be submitting that as a copy, right?
Yeah, and here's his copy of the proposed changes. That's included as well.
All right, and also a copy of your slides, right? You will be getting a copy of that?
Yeah, I will email you all a PDF of those slides, but it's the some of the details are included in my written testimony, which I will submit as well.
All right, thank you, sir. Now, as I'd like to also recognize, joined us, Senator James Paudon. Sir. Now, let me see, I'll start with the speaker. Would you like to ask any questions of the gentlemen on the board, on the panel?
That was very welcome testimony.
Thank you.
I have to admit that we were a bit timid. We were talking about a 4-cent, but then we thought we'd phase it in just to. But if you think that you're suggesting that we could do 10 cents if we went to the electorate in 2018 and not.
I have not talked to a single person in the past 6 months that has objected to an increase in fuel tax if we knew it would go to the use intended. A 10% increase, but this is the part. If you go to the public and do a very thorough education system, you have the government channel, present your case well over the government channel, and in a series of, like when the Election Commission puts out their brochure, put out a brochure that explains how much will be collected, what it will be used for, and point out that this money will be going to road repairs in the villages. And I would also recommend, as part of the legislation, that you prepare an annual report to taxpayers that this much was collected, this much was spent, and these were the roads it was spent on. I have talked to so many people that want to see mass transit system improve. The only thing that's stopping the mass transit system from being improved is the lack of money. Now, when we did a proposal, I was on the governor's mass transit task force. We put together a proposal that looked at a one-time infusion of $10 million and a $3 million a year cash infusion thereafter that would create a sustainable, commuter-focused mass transit system. And with that commuter-focused mass transit system, we could see all the economic spin-offs that we were talking about. But more important than that, there are 30,000 people on Guam that have disabilities. They suffer a severe deterioration in their quality of life because they are hostages. Yet, Friday, I heard Kool-Aid on the radio pleading for someone to give him a ride on the 4th of July to the dialysis center because our buses don't run on holidays, you see. So that's what's affecting the quality of life. But it's not just affecting the quality of life of people with disabilities. It's also affecting seniors. How many of you know seniors who are hostages to their nieces and nephews or grandchildren for rides and transportation because they can't drive anymore? Well, that number is growing rapidly because seniors are the fastest growing segment in our community. We're outgrowing the millennials, we're outgrowing the children because family sizes have gone down. So the senior population on this island needs to be better served, and a mass transit system that's designed from the ground up to serve commuters will also serve seniors. And guess what? We already have many of the resources in place to do this effectively right now. So 10 cents would be a minimal, and if you do it through the public approval process, you won't have any of the pushback that you're going to get if you demand or if you try to do it with Section N, voter approval not required, because I can guarantee you there will be a lot of pushback on any revenue bills coming out of this building that have Clause N in it. Now you say Clause N because the last few bills I've seen, they bury it way at the bottom, Clause N, severability. So we're going to be watching these bills, and every time we see that voter approval not required, we're going to think 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. I'll go to Will and we'll work our way down. Senator Will, you have nothing? Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe, first off, I want to thank you for your testimony, Mr. Lingro, and Director, thank you for your testimony. I know you've been down there since at least my first term, pushing this idea of adjusting the liquid fuel tax, and it kind of pushed us to really research that further. I actually made a public statement just so everyone knows that I was hoping to make that the last resort, and definitely we are the last resort. We're looking at the Guam Highway Fund and seeing how it's not been adjusted since its establishment in 1983. Regards to the voter approval, and the reason why I'm making that public is again, from the 32nd Legislature, we've been talking about roads. And the demand is clear out there. You've done your assessment of people out there that want roads fixed now. And I don't know what now means, but to me, I said, well, we'll have to put this out there if the people are willing to waive the voter approval. At least I'm making it public. Now, if your testimony is clear that your assessment is a majority of folks out there will rather wait and allow the director to continue with what he has left in the fund to work with this Village Streets Master Plan and the demands out there, then yes, I'm open to that as well. But this was made very transparent that I'm open to this idea of if the folks would like to make that adjustment now and have the director proceed with these plans that have been in place for many years already. We have these plans. People have reviewed them. I believe you've reviewed them. Where do we begin? So if that's going to require another step for the people to decide that the plan that we spent, like you said, $1 million on should proceed and start chipping away at it a lot sooner, then we're open to that. I also thank you for coming down here in February for where many community stakeholders supported a bond borrowing bill proposed by the Speaker of up to $50 million. And I thank you for your testimony in support of borrowing up to $50 million. And also the Governor and administration's support of trying to get these roads.
Well, let me correct you there. I'm not supporting borrowing $50 million. I'm supporting raising the taxes and using the taxes to pay for the repairs in lieu of borrowing $50 million. Because if we borrow $50 million, you're going to send $30 million off in the form of fees and interest. So rather than borrow $50 million and pay $80 million, let's just go ahead and raise the tax to 10%. Send an additional $10 million a year to Public Works, give Glenn the ability to repave 20 miles of village roads a year. Inch by inch is a cinch. We'll see the progress, because what we're concerned about is we keep talking about raising the public debt. And now the administration's on a full court press, and I apologize, but it's relevant to what he's saying, of raising the public debt. See, I think this is the 4th time since August he's proposed raising over $100 million. So you see, now we're talking about raising $100 million here. I think GPA is talking about raising $600 million, and now we're, we got to stop it at some point in time, and this is a good place to stop. Even if Glenn had $50 million, he couldn't use it right away. He would have to subcontract it out, and then the cost of the roads would go from $500,000 a mile to $1 million a mile. So if we're going to, let's eat the elephant one bite at a time instead of all at once. So let's go ahead and give him the money he needs to do 20 miles a year, and every village will begin to feel some improvement, whether he does it one village at a time or does the major. I know he's got a whole list of every mayor's wish list on which roads within their villages need the most work. But you know what? I'll bet none of those roads are more than 2 or 3 miles long at the most. So he would have the ability to go in and do 20 miles of roads, hitting the most critical roads at any given moment, and we would still have the ability to fund a world-class mass transit system. And I say world-class because economically, geologically, and population-wise, Guam is ideally suited to have one of the best mass transit systems in the world. We have a large concentration of population, but in a few areas, and we only have a 21-mile main corridor. Compare that to Honolulu. They have a 600-mile main road corridor. So, we have just a fraction of what they have to deal with in Honolulu. So if we were to develop that mass transit in conjunction with giving him the ability to repair roads, that sets a priority, because the main road into the village to the mayor's office needs to be a priority. And most often those are the roads, especially in Santa Rita, that need the most work. So by addressing both of these issues at the same time, we get scale of economy that we save money. And as we improve the roads, and as we take more cars off the roads, we see the economy being stimulated. We see the tourism industry expanding beyond the GPO Micronesian Mall corridor. Then everybody benefits. It's not often that we get a win-win-win-win situation raising taxes, but this is one of them. And you guys should embrace it and do it right and get public support behind it. Because if we take your approach, we're going to raise $1 million between now and voter approval, so we won't even pay for the study. But if we take the time to get the voter approval, and then we raise $10 million over 2018, then we've done it right. And we will be able to make significant inroads into the problem that Glenn has to face on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mr. Nguroa. If the people are aware that we could wait to 2018 to the general election to see what the results are of regards to the voter initiative or voter approval, then I'm open to that. I was being very open as well that I'm prepared to make the amendment given the demand out there that people want roads fixed. But if you are willing to say that a large majority of people can wait to the 2018 legislature, we'll wait.
Look how long we've waited so far.
Okay.
Let's do it right. That's all we're saying. And
then if we're going to make an adjustment, again, the speaker's right. We sat down. We've been meeting on this. I know what it's like to raise 50 cents to $1 to enter into the Aganya pool. And I know being in a tough position of facing the users of these facilities, and that's why we were very timid if we should go this route. And also in past proposals with the director of setting aside $2 million from the general fund to allow to, at least for asphalt, so that they have the $2 to $3 million worth of equipment. Those were things we were entertaining. So when we were looking at the 1.5 penny increase a year, we were hoping with just that slight adjustment we'll get him up to that threshold with his proposal. Now you're pointing out, and you're right. I've looked at the many states, and we're way below as far as adjusting our liquid fuel tax. And these states are doing this on a regular basis to make the necessary adjustments to improve their highways. But if you're proposing, again, this is a 4% increase over the 3 years, but you're stating to look at a larger amount of 10 cents.
Well, our gas companies proposed a 45-cent increase between March and June 30.
Right. So I'd like to have the director comment on that, because, Director, I know we've been down this road many times, and we have testimony here to, instead of 4 cents, looking at an adjustment of 10 cents, but through a voter initiative. What are your thoughts?
I'm biting at the bit here. What Ken brought up is significant, and I think for sustainability. First, before I make my comments, I'm going to qualify myself. There is substantial interest on my part, because I can't wait till the end of next election, because I don't know what's going to happen. But I am all for putting a sustainable system where the Department of Public Works actually does fix roads, and should fix roads ad infinitum, even before I go. So, and my mindset, again, just my qualification, my mindset is if we build the system and we make the system robust enough, so that, and it's a right system. I mean, you obviously can pull the rug from under it, but if it's a right system, once you get the wheels and the rock rolling down the hill, if anybody wants to stand in front of it for whatever reason, and I can't think of any good reason anybody would want to, even Ken's not even standing in front of, wanting to stand in front of the proposal to equip the Department of Public Works to build our roads. Then it's foolhardy for anybody to try to stop that system. I'm saying that we could do this today, and I'm saying there's two things that we need to do. Right now, and it's not uncommon what Ken is asking, and Senator or Speaker, you've already put that in play with the listing from the Mayor's Council for the secondary and tertiary roads. And then there's other, I mean, that's only like 16 million. We went back into that study because Senator Spaldon asked that what is the scientific approach of looking at every village and seeing which ones are in most need. So we added that and adapted that. It's a little bit more than 50 million, but still, we can actually get this thing done. I'm proposing, sir, that you give the Department of Public Works, because, and it's not unusual for states to go and like he said, what is it, 45 cents? I think I read something in California where they increased the tax so that they can fix certain roads, and the voters had to approve it, which they did. And that should be the system that we continually move forward on. So it's not whatever the voters want. But I need funds to address critical roads today. I can't wait. I can't wait till the end of November. And Senator or Vice Speaker Trelawney asked me what are my projects. Well, I've got projects. And I actually have gone even back to the federal highway, and I said, listen, I can't wait. We need to do road repair work. And so we reprogrammed roughly $12 million so that we were able to do this. And so I'm requesting that we do, this is the proposal, just a suggestion, that we do both. You give me, he's saying that 2 cents or 4 cents is well, I forget the term, is weak and not 4
cents over 3 years.
Yeah, is weak. But what I'm saying is that if you give us that ability to do that, and then give me or require me to give you the bigger list for the remaining 6 cents, which the voters can approve on or vote on, then I'm happy for that as well. I'm looking to do something today. And Ken says do it right, and I agree. We should do it right. But as we speak today, he's still paying, I don't know, $400, $600 in tires. He's still paying for road repair, vehicle repair and stuff. Those are the things that we need to get done today. And that's my compassionate plea, is that give me something that we can do today. I would not like to wait till the end of it.
Director, I thank you for bringing that up. I mean, that's interesting, a little interesting twist, and I know we have Mr. Lim Guerrero here that I'm not sure if you're open. You're basically saying that if we could proceed with a 4% now and maybe seek the other adjustment of 6% through a voter initiative, would that be something that we could look at, knowing the testimony here?
Well, this is going to require a little bit more work on your part, because right now the trust in elected officials is about here. Now, when we see Adelup taking money from the Children's Support Fund to cover payroll, there's no guarantee that the 4 cents, if you approved it today, there's no guarantee that that 4 cents is going to go to road repairs when we've got $105 million deficit, when we have vendors who haven't been paid for months and months and are threatening legal action against government of Guam. I see that unless we come up with a mechanism, Darrell brought it up in his testimony, where special funds are locked in for use by special funds, then we have a problem. Now, if the goal of this legislature, which we would have hoped by the amount of turnover we had, is to rebuild the trust with the public, you have to take the kinds of actions that are going to rebuild the trust of the public. Now, if you enact a 4-cent raise to address his immediate concerns and then go to the public for a bigger one later, maybe there could be some in between, like why don't you hold village meetings and let the public, because this meeting is 9 o'clock on a Monday. How many people have the opportunity to come here and testify at 9 o'clock on a Monday, which is one of the big problems of the public hearing thing. So anytime you're doing something with money, maybe consider doing it at a different time so that more people could come testify. But consider, if you want to rush it ahead and you were going to do a series of village meetings where people could come out and testify whether they were okay with doing it right away as opposed to doing it by a voter referendum, that might be an option. But right now it's going to be basically me and Glenn. And then you're going to make your decisions based on the testimony from me and Glenn, and the way things set right now, in view of the fact there is no guarantee that the money will go to what it's purposed for. There is no guarantee that the work will even be done. I mean, right now, the Highway Fund is paying bond payments for the School of Business building at UOG. I think the Highway Fund is paying for a number of things that have nothing to do with the highway. And so just think, for the past 10 years, Glenn could have used that $500,000 that goes to UOG to have paved, 10 miles of roads inside the villages. So that's why if we're going to raise the tax, do it the way it was set up. Yes, it's more convenient to do it this way, but once we start going down the slippery slope of convenience, let's see, the bill passing the legislature's pay raise, that was a convenience. I mean, a special session called in at the we at last hours, you know, that was a convenience. People didn't get a chance to weigh in, and look what it caused. So I understand his concern. He's got projects that he needs to do now. He's had to do those projects ever since he's been there. Carl Dominguez had to do them before him. Joanne Brown had to do them before him, and they never got done. But in the meantime, you know, $2.5 million went to the mayors for pickup trucks they didn't need. $1 million went to the University of Guam to fund a special reimbursement for visiting accounting professors to come to the University of Guam to give lectures on accounting. $3.4 million went to the single-use huts at FESPAC that are still not being utilized to this day. So right there, we're looking at $5 million. Now, if instead we had given that $5 million to Glenn, he wouldn't be sitting here suggesting very strongly that we not do this in the general election, because he'd have enough money to do 10 miles now. So it comes down to priorities, expediency, and which people are yelling the loudest. Right now, I think I'm yelling louder than Glenn.
I just want to be very clear, and because, you know, the concerns that were raised regarding the voter waiver, regarding the adjustment of 1 cent or 1.5 cents over the next 3 years. I just want to be very clear that we are open to addressing the immediate needs of making that the director's concerns and making that adjustment accordingly now, and then with your proposal of the additional 6 cents that will make it 10 cents over, we'll look at proposals to put that before the voters of Guam. I just want to make sure, or the other options as you made it in your testimony, that make a separate proposal of up to 10% and put that before the voters of Guam. But then again, that's making sure that people are aware that we'll have to at least wait another year to the 2018 election. Again, I'm open to all these suggestions. I just want to make sure that the committee's clear and that people are aware of what we're attempting to do here. The director's been down here many times, and the liquid fuel tax did not come up on my radar ever until the director kept trying to find solutions to this. I can't control policies of the past of how the fund was used for other areas outside of the highway fund or its intended purpose, but I do want to know what I could do now with solutions that are being put to the table. 4 cents. I know the speaker and his team proposed it to stretch it, but now we're seeing that it's weak, and I thank you for putting that before the committee, and maybe we could adjust it and make it clear that it's a 4 cents adjustment, and maybe the 6% we could address it to put before the people to address other needs in our community with regards to the mass transit. My understanding, I know the mass transit gets funded to the highway fund already. So again, I just want to be very clear, because I'm prepared to make amendments to the bills. But that's really, you know, the public's part of helping craft these bills, and that's what I'm attempting to do here.
Well, as I understand the rules, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there is substantial changes to the bill after the public hearing, there'll be another public hearing on it. So what I'm content to do is to see what you guys, as a result of this testimony, because we're both heading the same direction. We're just taking different paths. And now this is what you guys were elected for. This is the hard work where you guys have to come together and put together a bill that, now remember, a good agreement is one where neither party is totally happy. You know? So right now, he wants money now, and I want money later, but I want more money than he wants now. So, you know, that's where we're starting at. But when I look at the way the bill's drafted right now, the first year of collections doesn't even pay for the plan that he's trying to implement. That's not enough. So I'll just go ahead and finish my testimony there, because I think we've pointed out that no matter what happened, this bill is going to have to go through some form of revision and be heard again. And at that point in time, we'll see what you guys have come up with.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Guerrero and Director again. And as you pointed out earlier, I know you focused on California and some of the adjustments, but I just have some, just for the general public's awareness and knowing what has happened within the recent, at least since 2013 up to 2017, at least in Pennsylvania, you can see that their state gas tax per gallon is at 58.2%. They're the highest. Washington's at 49.4 cents. Hawaii, you mentioned in your testimony, is at 44.38 cents. Actually, Alaska is the lowest, but I think we can all agree that Alaska is right on top of oil. But 18 states are 32 cents or higher. 17 states are 23.01 to 31 cents or higher. So these figures just make it very clear, at least, that we are being very reasonable with our adjustment, understanding that people's, I know that folks do count the pennies at the pump, and I appreciate your testimony. And Director, thank you for the many years you've come down on different solutions, and we're trying. We're definitely trying.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Senator Spaldon, you would have any questions you want to pose on the two? Not right now. Speaker Cruz, before I go
I just want to make two clarifications, Ken. The $1 million that went to the university for the accounting was from the Board of Accountancy. They have hundreds and hundreds of Asians from various countries come down, take the exam here, and the fees that they raised from giving the CPA exam here, they saved, and they gave an endowment to the university of $1 million for the purpose of bringing in renowned professors to assist in the training of the accounting students, and that was not from the Territorial Highway Fund. I didn't want you to.
Oh, no. I didn't mean to imply that it was from the Territorial Highway Fund any more than the mayor's pickup trucks weren't from the Territorial Highway Fund.
I understand, but you mixed it all in there, and also I wanted to make one other clarification.
Okay.
Though the loan agreement for the building at the university says the loan is guaranteed by payment from the highway fund, actually it's the general fund. We just used that and said to the bank, in the event that there's absolutely no other way of paying for it, the highway fund will guarantee you the $500,000 a year. But money's fungible, and so it's not just their money. And if we didn't take it from there, others, I mean, when we prepared the budget, we grab from all kinds of places because it is the general fund. But to say that the university's building was just from that, otherwise we just increased the university's budget to $34 million, and they would pay for it from their own general fund and not from the highway fund. But the loan agreement made 20 years ago had that as a guarantee, though that's not technically where the money is coming from. It's just a loan document that says that's where the money is coming from.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification.
Well, yeah, and it is. In trying to prepare it, it's like saying you're only using your rental money from this unit to pay for the repairs of the house, when actually you spent the rental money on something else, and this money is coming in from something else to make the upgrades and repairs in the rental unit. It's all in there. And I just wanted to make sure that people understood that.
Well, I'm glad you made the clarifications there, but I think the fact that so many people are asking these types of questions and pointing these things out, because someone was the one that pointed out to me, and they showed me this bill where it was coming from. I think it's a good thing, because it shows that now people are taking a more concerned look at our government and the actions of our government, and I think that's a good thing. And at my level, when I say at my level, I'm out in the community all the time talking, and the questions that people are coming up and asking me are good questions, and they cause me to think a lot as well. But it makes me feel, I feel real good about the fact that so many people are so interested in such an arcane subject as, you know, fuel taxes or clauses, and, you know, I mean, like my famous waiver end. I get asked about that all the time, you know. So I'm glad that there's that level of participation, and I applaud. Well, one of the things is I see the government becoming more transparent. I rely on the Office of Finance and Budget website a lot. I'm referring other people to it as well. We still have a long way to go to reach the level of transparency that I think we need to have, but we're moving that way, and that's a good thing. I've seen several bills introduced to improve transparency, and that's what stops the misconceptions taking place. And I'm guilty of it, because I just go by what I read in the different bills being reported out and the different reports I see in the different committee reports. I picked up on this University of Guam thing when I was looking at an audit report of the Guam Regional Mass Transit System and the Territorial Highway Fund, and that was one of the notes in there about the $500,000 a year going for University of Guam. Now, you clarified that point, but the way it reads in our documentation, it looks to me and other people like the Territorial Highway Fund is actually paying $500,000. It's just semantics. But as we get better at government, because like I point out to people, you know, government of Guam has only really existed for, you know, since the 70s. You know, because we had that transition phase, but it wasn't until we started electing our own officials that we truly had a government of Guam. You know, so now, you know, we're getting better. We look at how the United States we refer to all the time, but how long have those states had state governments? How long have those cities had city governments? You know, they've had a lot of time to work out some of the things that we are still working on. This is a great one right here. Having our hearings online, I've been talking to the legislative staff about, you know, you really ought to put the subjects so that when people go to the legislature, we could see, oh, look, there's the hearing on the fuel tax, but what are they going to see? They're going to see public hearing July 10, 9 a.m. That doesn't tell them anything, whereas on the flash screen, they could have public hearing, bill this, bill this, bill this. You know, but we're getting there, because guess what? Last year, we didn't even have this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leonguerel. We're going to move along a little bit faster before we get off track. Senator Elgin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Leonguerel, thank you for your testimony this morning. There's one particular comment that you shared, Ken, in regards to the trust that our people have in their government. And I think that any time that there's going to be any proposal to increase the liquid fuel tax, we certainly, and I like that comment that you shared earlier, we need to lockbox those funds and ensure our people that when it's dedicated specifically for the construction of roads or the refurbishment of roads and the repair of roads, then that's exactly what those funds are going to be utilized for. So I want to just thank you for providing those comments. because I think it's very apropos in this particular case. It's very pertinent. We need to ensure that any time that we're asking our people to take, whether it's pennies or it's a dime on a dollar or a dollar out of their pocket every single year to be able to contribute back to the community, that they can understand that, yes, this is going specifically to repair these roads with whatever master plan DPW would have in terms of repairing secondary and tertiary roads. So I think that one of the things, Mr. Chairman, that I certainly would like to see is, and I was not here during your presentation, Mr. Leongar, Director of DPW, but it's really proposing to raise fees, but how and where are those fees going to be applied? What roads will be repaired over the course of, let's say, if it generates $1 million or $2 million in the next calendar year, what roads do you anticipate repairing so that the people of Guam can hold our feet to the fire, both the members of the legislature and also the members of the executive branch? So, Mr. Chairman, I certainly hope that the Director of DPW will be able to provide some information and incorporate that into some format in the legislation.
So, sure. Very, very, very clear. I'm trying to get but to Ken, and it's to my understanding that we don't. I mean, you go to the public if you're going for a bond bill. If you're raising the taxes and you're holding me accountable for, say, you have 5 roads that cost this amount of money, and you're saying you're going to raise tax, and that's what it's only going to be paid for. That's a different matter. I mean, you're still, it's very transparent, very holding me accountable, and if you want to even include other stewardship responsibilities like reporting this on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, happy to do that. I've been preaching this, I've been saying this since I first came in, and again, my passion is that I don't know what's going to happen come December next year. I know what I can do between now and December, and therefore I'm biting at the bit to come and fix roads. I've got $16 million worth of roads that the mayors have come with. I'm sending a letter to Senator Terlahi about Route 17 that needs to be fixed, Route 28 that needs to be fixed, Route 3 and 9 needs to be fixed, Zero Down, Route 4, Talafofo. There's roads throughout the island that we've already got that covered with DOD that they're going to give us money for, but I've got roads that I don't have funds for, that I need funds for, not just secondary and tertiary roads, but even the routed roads, which I'm required by my stewardship agreement with the Federal Highways that I have to maintain. I'm saying, yes, go to the public. Yes, come up with that big listing. But today, come up with this list of projects that I'll submit this to you. I've got to give this to Vice Speaker Terlahi, but happy to submit it to the entire legislature. But give me the ability to fix roads, not wait tomorrow, starting today. That's what I'm asking for.
And that's what this particular proposal would provide, additional resources. And what
Correct.
I need as a sense of understanding is what roads does DPW or can DPW repair within a certain timeline so that the people of Guam can understand. If we're going to generate an additional $1 million, people of Guam, based on DPW's master plan, this is what they have committed to complete. Now, by the end of the fiscal year, if in fact all the funds have been exhausted and the list has been exhausted, then certainly that's where we come back to the table and regenerate a subsequent list so that the people can understand where their tax dollars are going. And it all comes back to, and I share that level of responsibility, the accountability not only of the executive branch, but really the accountability on members of this side of the government of Guam, so that when we say, people of Guam, there's going to be an adjustment, we're asking you to invest an additional $1 or $6, whatever that amount, every single year, and this is how those funds are going to be expended in a lockbox. So I just wanted to Mr. Chairman, encourage that particular information be provided also as part of this packet. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Leongross.
Thank you, gentlemen. I had a few questions, but Mr. Leongross, Ken, you've answered it. 10 cents. Referendum, send it to the people. It's a nice thought. That was last year in November when the election happened. It's a new group of folks in the legislature. I think that message was very clear. be more transparent. Bring it out to the folks you mentioned, town hall meeting. I mentioned that to Senator Morrison. We will schedule town hall meetings before session and enough time for the committee to submit a report. Find out where the folks feel out there, the people out there, the northern and the southern folks. I'm hoping that the roads get repaired. It's going to start from the south. I live up north, and up north has enough improvement, maybe just a little bit too much. Some of the road improvements they have up there, they don't have as many people that are going through Talafo, Yomadak, Marizu, and Iran. So I'm hoping it starts down south. My only question I really have is the businesses with buses, trucks, and heavy equipment, do they pay a different fee in fuel? Probably the answer is no, right? Has there ever been a consideration that they should pay a little bit more? Because the last time I checked, they're the one that's actually breaking up the road more than my truck is doing, or my cars are doing, or your car or your pickup is doing. And I'm just concerned that, you know, I know the law states they're supposed to be on the right lane. They're on all the lanes. And whenever they slam the brakes going up San Ramon or coming down San Ramon Hill, they just pull the road with them when it's hot. So I'm just concerned that we seem to be looking at the fuel costs for the common person, but I don't see any of the businesses paying anything different. And if they're not paying anything different, how do we make that fair for the people of Guam? When the businesses out there are driving a lot of heavy equipment, and maybe that needs to be addressed with the police department to enforce more the stay on the right lane. But when they need to make a left, they ride on the left lane for a good mile and a half before they really make the left. And there's damaging being done on the roads. And I know what you're going through, Mr. Glenn. But I brought it up with, like I said, with Senator Morrison, that if he wants, the committee will go out there and do town hall meetings real soon. I'll just get with Senator Morrison so we can put it out, and we can go out there and find out. And if the folks out in the community says, do a referendum, then that's where we'll go. We'll push that. Because I know Ken's going to be pushing that, so I have no problem. I'll see the social media on that one. And I welcome that all the time. Senator Spardo, would you have anything else you want to bring up? Okay, and that completes Bill 122. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. And we will now proceed to Bill 123, and then after Bill 123, just to let everybody, the public know that we will be going back to Bill 88, which is Senator Spardo's bill, okay, after Bill 123. Bill 123 is an act to extend non-commercial driver's license reciprocity to, what a word, keep it simple, equal to the residents of the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas who are United States citizens issued by his or her home island, by adding a new section to Title 16, Guam Code Annotated, Section 3101, license requirement. Senator Castro, we have no testimony, but we got a supporter. We got Deborah supporting. She's like, don't make me testify. Senator Castro, would you please give your opening? And
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the co-sponsors to the measure, Senator Morrison, Senator San Agustin, Senator Rodriguez. It's a pretty straightforward piece that we've introduced, designed basically to allow residents of the CNMI who have a valid driver's license for no less than 1 year to be able to exchange their CNMI driver's license for a Guam driver's license. The co-sponsors, and we hope our colleagues in the legislature can share our findings, that such an agreement would benefit students who come to the university or the college, or even for school, high school. Also benefits persons conducting business on Guam, and as my colleagues in the CNMI legislature have expressed their chief concern, it would also benefit those who are here for medical referral purposes or for other business that extends beyond the 30-day stay. All this is designed with a greater goal in mind, Mr. Chairman, and that's to strengthen the political and cultural solidarity between the people of Guam and the people of the CNMI. I also just want to enter into the record that mirror legislation is also being introduced by my colleague in the CNMI legislature, namely Representative Ivan Blanco, for the purposes of making good on this reciprocity agreement so that the same privileges are afforded to the people of Guam when we commute over to the CNMI. Also worth noting, Mr. Chairman, is that we've had 3 meetings with the local Department of Revenue and Taxation to discuss the measure, and while they had a couple of concerns, we were able to compromise in order that we can meet the minimum threshold that they were desiring in terms of the requirements set forth by DRT. We can acknowledge on the face of the legislation, Mr. Chairman, that we have similar systems of transportation, but to the concern of some of the constituents, both jurisdictions have a system of examination. Perhaps in the discussion period, I'll share some of the early concerns and how we might be able to address that. Also worth noting, Mr. Chairman, is that I have yet to receive data that would suggest that the people of the CNMI have a higher percentage of traffic citations when compared to other persons who reside and drive on Guam. This is simply not the case, and the data doesn't support it yet. The co-authors have extended their desire, namely yourself, Senator San Agustin, and Senator Rodriguez, of building upon this piece to include other cooperating United States or other territories, or even to our cousins in regional governments, assuming we can pull together some points of mutual benefit between those jurisdictions as well. And perhaps you could speak to this after the brief summary. I also want to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, that the CNMI Governor, the Honorable Ralph de Leon Torres, is preparing written testimony in support of the measure. We attempted to have Representative Ivan Blanco patch in through phone call, teleconference, to verbally express his support. He was able to do that on one of the local radio talk shows, but he did ask me to extend the following sentiments: that his love and appreciation goes out to his colleagues in the Guam Legislature and to the people of Guam for favorably considering agreements that mutually benefit both territories. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Would any of my colleagues, Senator Uggan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just one particular question. I noticed that this would apply reciprocity or allow for Guam, based on certain qualifications, proof of U.S. citizenship, having had a valid CNMI driver's license for at least 1 year. But I don't see the reciprocity component here. If CNMI provides Guam residents a similar service, then we should extend it, certainly in partnership with CNMI. But if we pass this on our end and we continue to accept CNMI driver's licenses based on these qualifications, the question is, what if CNMI does not provide it today? And if in fact they're providing it today, then certainly this is reciprocity. And I would like at least some version of a clause to be provided in there so that there's that emphasis that it's got to be a combined regional agreement.
Senator Castro, would you like to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Senator. Your comments are well noted. As we all know, both jurisdictions have the distinct privilege of their executive branches administering or promulgating certain rules and regulations to allow for such an agreement to occur without the cover of statute. Every time, and I resided in the CNMI, every time I would go there, I always had the privilege, without it being explicitly in their statute, of exchanging this Guam driver's license for a CNMI driver's license. Their executive branch already extends the privilege as a matter of policy by practice with the current and past administrations. The same privilege or authority rests with the current Department of Revenue and Taxation. It's a matter of the director promulgating that, and in certain circumstances he has or she has made exceptions to that. What I'm attempting to do by this particular piece of legislation is to establish it by statute so that's no longer subject to one's discretion, or should there be another administration that chooses not to honor the reciprocity, that it's actually in the code. And so thank you, Senator Uggan, for that. It's a good point, and Senator Ivan Blanco, forgive me for not having it readily available, but he has already introduced the House bill that provides the same type of privilege. But I appreciate that. Thank you, sir, and I'll get that information to you.
I'd like to also recognize that Vice Speaker Therese Terlai is here. Senator Morrison, would you like to make any comment on the bill?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the author for allowing me to be a co-sponsor of this measure. And, you know, for many years I've been looking at reciprocity agreements, at least with the it's my tenure up at the Contractors Licensing Board, and how our local contractors could have that ability to participate in other jurisdictions. So I think this is a great step, and maybe look at further types of reciprocity agreements, not only for contractors, but wherever in the government we could, if it's CNMI, but even throughout our nation, where our folks with certain types of certificates that meet certain types of criteria or accreditation, that they be able to participate, not only in CNMI, but throughout our nation. So I appreciate this effort. It's a great start. Thank you.
Senator Spaldon, do you have anything you would like to comment on this bill? Sir? Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping Reverend Tax would be here to answer some questions, but I wanted to know if they have this discretion right now, what is the reason for not extending that reciprocity?
Senator Castro, would you want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you for the question. There were several concerns in our first meeting with the representatives, and in no particular order. The first concern was that there were some covenants associated with federal monies through some kind of a grant that gave rise to the progressive driver's ed system that we currently have in place here on Guam. I since asked for the supporting documentation to that end and have yet to receive it. But there's nothing explicitly in writing that precludes us from extending the reciprocity agreement, provided at least in Reverend Tax's words, and we probably could get that in writing as well, and should, and I will follow up. As long as there's an examination component, that was their minimum threshold that they had established with me, at least verbally, in the second and third technical meetings. The other one was some concern that residents of the CNMI were not as familiar with some of the traffic practices here on Guam, namely I guess, in 3 or 4 lane highways. And I'm not sure if this was, I couldn't determine, Vice Speaker, for the record, in follow-up conversations with other folks, exactly what it is we were referring to in that discussion. I don't know of a multi-lane, multi-story highway. I've lived there. They have the same traffic signals. There are 4 or 3-way stops there. I think the order of yielding is consistent throughout the nation. We have the same U.S. transportation laws that we have to abide by, and perhaps a senator here can refute that or affirm that. But I haven't seen explicitly a good enough of example that would suggest that people who get off the plane from Saipan, as an example, aren't able to drive the way the rest of us drive on the island of Guam. As a matter of fact, I would differ and suggest that if we all pulled up at the 4-way intersection there at ITC, that you couldn't distinguish a CNMI resident from a Guam resident. And so we can reach out again to DRT and see exactly what the technical concerns are with the types of practices and or equipment or highway rules and regulations that folks from the CNMI may not be as familiar with. But Vice Speaker, just for your information, I will follow up, ma'am. I think it's a great question, and I did meet with both Director Camacho and Deputy Director Marie on this, and they're in support of the measure, and if they find anything inconsistent with what we're attempting to do here, they will enter it into the record. I do have one more, Mr. Chairman, if I could, before the next question. I didn't have it readily available, but I do have it in front of me, and I'll forward it for the record. The Representative Blanco's measure. It's a bill for an act to exempt residents of the neighboring island of Guam from the operator's license requirements by amending Title IX, subsection 2203, in their rules and regulations, signed with an affixed signature by Representative Ivan Blanco.
Madam Vice, do you have anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, Mr. Chair, I would just like to respectfully request that the committee include some testimony from Department of Revenue Tax as to if they have any reason that they are not entering into this agreement already. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I will. Senator Castro, you have a follow-up on that one?
Yes, Vice Speaker, it just came back to mind. I didn't have my notes, but the other concern was that by extending this agreement, and that's why we only included folks, I believe, if it's not explicit here, who are U.S. citizens and who had their license for at least a year. The concern was, and it's a legitimate one, that this reciprocity agreement might give rise to a bunch of folks from Guam, residents of Guam, going over to the CNMI to get a driver's license that doesn't have a time and examination education requirement like we do here. And so the idea is you're going to get on a plane, theoretically go to Rota, and get a CNMI driver's license and come back and exchange your license for a Guam license in order to bypass the driver's ed requirements here. And while it is a legitimate concern, so we made the compromise because it was going to be a license for a license on face value. And so the compromise was at least for a year you had to have had your CNMI license. My response to the Department of Revenue and Taxation is that to forego the opportunity for reciprocity based on your suspicion that there's widespread fraud in the system of government and the CNMI, for me, is not compelling enough of a reason. Because if, for example, we're finding that folks are fraudulently obtaining a CNMI license in order to bypass the Guam driver's ed examination, then that would be a major call to the fidelity of the programs administered by the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And I think that I'd probably be the chief sponsor of a bill that removes it from the statute. But until then, I'd like to give full faith and credit to the government of the CNMI and the governor and members of his administration to ensure that their examination requirements are strictly adhered to, and that leaves very little room for fraud. And I did suggest, Vice Speaker, to Deputy Director Marie Benito, that in fact, if that was the case, which I'm not convinced that it's done widespread, I don't think that we're going to see thousands upon thousands of our residents going there to reside for a certain period of time in order to get a CNMI-based license to exchange it for a Guam license. But if that should be the case, then I'd be the first to introduce legislation to repeal the measure.
Okay, thank you, Senator Castro. Yes, Madam Vice.
My final question, Mr. Chair, is just, does it matter whether it's that, what's the new driver's license that they're doing now? Yeah, does that have any impact on this? Because
No.
I know there's other requirements.
No, the real ID card has nothing to do with driver license, just so that the people in Guam understand this. Basically, the Guam ID, the new Real ID Act is in reference to travel. And if you pull it up on the web page, it has mainly to do with access to federal installation, federal buildings, you want to go on the base. If you have a Real ID Act or the Guam driver license today, which is in compliance with the Real ID Act, you can get on the base. It's the best identification. It's like a passport. You can use it to travel off island, except when you go to Japan. Then of course you're stuck. You need a passport. But when you want to travel anywhere in the mainland, the Real ID Act is the way to go. And that's what it did. It was just minimized from using the passport. But one thing I will be asking, or I will follow up with revenue and taxes. Number one, I'm concerned about exactly what you brought up, is that why is it that we deny our folks from Saipan? I also look at, why do we deny our folks from the Philippines? Why do we deny our folks from Palau or any other islands? Because number one of the biggest things they bring up at Revenue and Tax is that, well, we need to get a 5-year certificate of they've been driving. Well, you know what? Do they ask you that in California? Do they ask you that in Washington, D.C.? I'm asking them to give me that answer. Because if they don't ask that in the States, and they don't ask that in Palau, or in the Philippines, or in Saipan, then we shouldn't be asking that question. And I honestly believe that the governments just need to sit down and talk to each other and come down to an agreement exactly what they'll allow. Because what I go through pretty much every day with the motorcycle clubs I'm part of is that folks that come from the States that got a license and had to take their motorcycle safety course, and there's nothing in Guam for motorcycle safety course in Guam, and go to the road test, it's a lot harder than it is here on Guam. And for folks that are in the military, they go to the national motorcycle safety course that even is harder than even the revenue and tax safety course they go through. So I like them to answer, why don't they allow that and accept that? And then go down to the next level. The folks that come from the mainland that have these commercial driver's license for heavy equipment, they go through a series of certification process to drive 18-wheelers, heavy equipment in the mainland. When they come to Guam, the first thing they're told is that whatever company you work for, you need to get them to allow you to bring the heavy equipment up to revenue and tax so they can use for road testing. I have a lot of reservations about that because, number one, I don't want to question too much the employees at revenue and tax, but there's probably only one individual right now up there that drives a bus or drives heavy equipment. Nobody else does when they do the road test. So I don't know how much we're paying for that one person to do all the road tests. But that being said, unless we have other comments to this bill, there's going to be a lot more questions that Revenue and Tax has to answer and respond also to what the inquiry of the Vice Speaker and also what Senator Ogden brought up, making sure all the governments are communicating. If we're going to allow this bill, we make sure, and I know that you have a bill from CNMI, we make sure that it's going to work in the benefit of all. You know, it's one for all for one. Senator Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to your point, Vice Speaker, one of the major reasons that gave rise to the bill was that 5-year requirement, and I don't know if I failed to mention that in the legislative findings and intent. I could share 2 examples. Well, first, as the Senator noted, former Revenue Tax employee, the entire driver's license system, I think, is ripe for revamp, whether it's commercial driver's licenses or the motorcycle licensure or even just the basic operator's license. While we can request of a 5-year letter affirming that you've had legal standing to drive and in good standing, you have 18-year-olds who are commuting to the University of Guam and they can't even get a brand new vehicle because they're asked for a 5-year validation from their local bureau of, driver's license bureau. That would put them at the age of 13. And as progressive of a driver's ed program as we have here, I doubt even very much that they too would have even some kind of a permit. And so that's the one extreme for students. And then on the other extreme, and this was another reason, Mr. Chairman, why the bill was put forward is because, I am aware of a manamko, someone 55 and older, who moved to Guam to assist her family in making this jurisdiction their home and was asked for a 5-year validation. And she doesn't have the privilege of WhatsApping her cousin over at the local Bureau of Transportation for that letter with an original signature. And yet you want to ask this manamko, this Saina, who's been driving for as long as I've been legally allowed to drive, probably even since as long as I've been alive, you're questioning her driving integrity even though she's held a license that has expired or is about to expire within the year. And so this was meant to address that gap, and for the record, it's the minimal we can do if you look at the entire spectrum of driver's licensure here in the territory. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that concludes my comments for the bill.
Thank you. That completes the on Bill 123. I did mention earlier that we looked at Bill 88-34. Now that the sponsor's here, I'd like to bring it back and ask the sponsor. The bill is an act to amend item F of 50103 of Chapter 50, Title 12, Guam Code Anthony, relative to fees resulting from the insurance of bonds and other obligations. Senator Spadons, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I apologize. There was a mix-up in my schedule, and I was anticipating for the public hearing on this particular bill to be heard this afternoon. And, of course, I was wrong. So, but thank you for allowing Bill 88 to come back for a public hearing. Mr. Chairman, in several past requests to issue bonds, I have been successful in getting my colleagues' support for the initiative before us today. The aim of Bill number 88-34 COR is very straightforward. Whenever a request comes before the legislature to issue bonds, any fees that GITA may be entitled to receive shall be paid from the source of repayment and not be included in the amount to be borrowed on the bond market. Mr. Chairman, in the past, there have been many instances where bonds have been issued and those fees that are due to GITA for administrating the whole process are paid out of the proceeds from the bonds. In other words, if we go out to a bond market, say for example, and borrow $100 million, the fees that are to be paid by GITA are taken from that $100 million that we just borrowed on. So what happens there is that the fees that we are paying to GITA actually accumulate interest over time, and that is at a cost to the people. I have reviewed the fiscal note issued by BBMR, and I would be willing to include in the bill the option of GITA fees being amortized over the first year or two of a bond issue under a principal-only debt service payment. In the case of a refinancing of existing bonds, there should be no problem paying GITA's fees from the savings to be realized by the refinancing. Most of the time when we go to the bond market for refinancing, it's because the market rates are lower than what we borrowed at in the past. So the logic is that, well, if we're going to save money because we're going to refinance the bonds, then really the fees should come out of the savings that we're going to realize, and there will be no interest paid upon those fees. My overall goal in this legislation is to minimize the cost to taxpayers and ratepayers for any bond issue. I have other responses to the fiscal note, but I will listen to the testimony before making them, or wait till we discuss this in session. I ask my colleagues supporting this language being added to the enabling statute for GITA as one of several steps to be taken when determining the cost of issuance of any future bonds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Senator Spaldon. Madam Vice Speaker, would you like to comment?
I would, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. And I wanted to commend the sponsor of this bill. It looks like a great bill, and if it's going to save the people of Guam money, especially in borrowing, it's a very good idea. I'm very concerned, Mr. Chair. I would like to put on the record that GITA is not here to comment on this bill, and the fiscal note we have received is from BBMR, but not from GITA. And I think things like this, they are supposed to be our financial advisors for the government of Guam for borrowing and the costs of borrowing, and so I would like to hear from them, Mr. Chair, in regards to this bill, and otherwise, on the face of it, it looks like a very good idea. It's just mas.
Yes, thank you. Senator Spaldon, I like your proffered amendment, and because you stated it here in the public hearing, like I've offered to Senator Morrison, if you would submit it, it's heard in the public hearing, and then will be part of the committee report as amended, your bill, because I like that. It's like borrowing money for your house. You don't take it out of the loan. You pay it up. That's called closing costs. You pay everything separate from what you borrow, and that's a very good way to do business. And I'd appreciate if you could submit it, and then we'd be part of the committee. Unless you have anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, just to assure you that I will submit my testimony, or at least my opening statement on this bill, for the committee to look over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. This has completed the hearings on Mr. Garcia, Bill 63, 64, 65, Bill 88, Bill 122, Bill 123. Public reminder, the committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. Augustin at gmail.com. My office is located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761, South Marine Corps Drive, Tumuning, Guam, 96931. Si Dios Masi for your attendance and participating in today's hearing, and for those at home, thank you for watching. It is now 11:09, and this concludes the public hearing. Thank you.